Rajiv, it is so great to be back with you here today. I would love if you could tell us more about yourself and also what the Columbia Climate School's goals are.
Thank you, Sophia, and it's a privilege to be here with you today. The Climate School has been formed because the world is at a critical crossroads. This is the biggest commitment that a university can make to any issue. And as someone who's been on the streets with young people all my life, as an economist that studied this question of systems change, not just incremental change, as someone that's worked with business leaders to try to figure out how do we transform our business models, I feel that there's a huge opportunity here right now to recognize that education has a critical role to play if we're going to address the climate crisis. Our world is so fractured right now, but the cracks are how the light gets in. And I think if we're able to organize in this decisive decade in the way that we need to, we have the potential to really crack those cracks a little bit bigger and get some more light in and actually change the system.
I completely agree. Education is key to humanity's survival. And can you talk to us about how do you think the current education system is equipping young people like me to confront the challenges that the world is facing? Are we doing a good job, or is there still work left to be done?
I think one of the challenges with education is that, and as a young Scot as well, remembering going through education, that we're taught so much to download information, to regurgitate information. We're not always taught to think for ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily involved in the decisions that affect our lives. I think the next step in education is about engaging people, ensuring that education is about not just showing people, but involving people so that they can actually take action on solutions and build from the ground up those solutions. And I think what's interesting about the Climate School is that you have a university not just based in New York, which is a global center for finance and media and the United Nations, but also 10 global centers around the world, many of which are in the global south, in Nairobi, in Mumbai, in Tunis, and the ability to really think about how do we solve this question at a global level, but also rooted in the communities where some of the biggest climate impacts are hitting us home.
And how do you think the role of education and the role of educators needs to change in the future if we are to address these critical challenges that humanity faces?
I think education needs to really scale up. I think we have to move beyond a model where education is accessible to the few and not the many. I think if we really look at the scale of the challenge that we face, where we have to transform our food system to feed 9.5 billion people, what we need to learn is about how can we feed each other? How do we actually do that? How do we learn some of the skills that our ancestors knew? Education transforming isn't just about looking forward. It might also be about looking back. What is the earth-based wisdom that perhaps we've forgotten that we might learn from those on the ground who are what we call regenerating our oceans, and the fishermen that are adapting to climate change, who are also at the same time repairing ecosystems? How do we learn from those communities that are actually helping us understand what does adaptation look like? As much as we learn from the science and the policy and all the other types of knowledge creation that we have coming out of universities.
Like you were saying, there is so many different factors to consider: science, policy. So can you walk us through also partnerships? What does that look like in your day-to-day?
Well, one of the things that I spent the last 2 years of my life working on was an inquiry into the future of climate action called the Decisive Decade. And it was all about how do we organize climate action, and really recognizing that the only way we can move forward is through radical collaboration. We need the shakers like you in the streets with Fridays for the Future as much as we need the analysts at organizations like the World Resources Institute, or as much as we need business leaders who are pioneering new solutions like we just heard to packaging and some of the big questions we have around food consumption, and how do we make sure that people actually have access to energy. And we've got some of the biggest minds on global energy solutions, but now we need to think about what does it mean to create laboratories all around the world that can help us to both ensure energy access, but at the same time reduce the carbon footprint.
You're completely right. Young people are getting out into the streets and striking. We're striking this Friday, but I think that we also need to talk about how can individuals support the education of young people to help to manifest a more peaceful and sustainable world. So what do you think people can do to support children's education?
Well, I think what we need is a way to translate this insatiable appetite for action that we have in this generation, which I think is something that we should all applaud, to policy impact. And one of the things we're doing at the Climate School is trying to create a policy impact hub that really starts to look at these questions of what will it take to not only call for action on some of these questions, but actually organize mayors and cities and in different parts of the world, the various different stakeholders that need to work together to drive that action. And I think the next step is you're going to start to see some of these young people coming through, just like myself and others. We've started to see that the best way to drive action is to stand for office, to walk into institutions and try to change those institutions in ways that speak to the challenges that we face.
And can you share with us, is there any upcoming initiatives that the Columbia Climate School is working on that you're excited to share with our audience?
Well, I'm really excited about a number of the flagship initiatives of the Climate School. I mean, we're working on coastal resilience, and I spent 2 months in Jamaica and spoke to fishing communities and learned so much from those communities. And you start to see that, the fact that we need to increase mangrove cover by 40% isn't something we can solve from a university in New York, but it is something that we can help with if we connect the universities of the West Indies and the Global Mangroves Alliance and the global financing systems that are not really reaching the people, and build the mechanisms to try to ensure that we are at scale, not just in Jamaica, but in small island states around the world, beginning to adapt to the impact of climate change. Or if we look at the questions around reparations and loss and damage, my own country of Scotland, where I sit on the Just Transition Commission, was the only country at COP26 that put real money on the table for loss and damage. And it actually built 2 out of the 3 plantations that were built during the slave trade in Jamaica. And so you start to see that countries know that we need to look at our past and come to terms and heal with that reality if we're going to move forward. And that's why peace, climate action, and security, all of these issues are so critical. And that's why I'm so glad that Peace One Day is here to underscore that climate action and peace are totally inseparable.
I completely agree. Climate and peace go hand in hand, and I would love if you could share, maybe as a final reflection, either something that you wish our audience knew about climate and the work that Columbia is doing, or a call to action. What do you want our audience to do to get involved and support the work that you're doing?
Well, I think what we need is more young people learning about how to take action. We need young people to come not only through the education system, but also to take action in multiple ways. We also need more connection between young people and policymakers. And I think what we need is partnerships between different schools and different universities and different kinds of stakeholders. And I think what we need is a kind of global partnership to address this question. And we need to move away from, looking after only ourselves and think about what does it mean to look after the planet as a whole. And that's going to require a slightly different mindset. And I think hopefully transcending some of these questions and thinking about what does a more peaceful future looks like helps us to get into that mindset shift.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I'm really excited to see what you and the Columbia Climate School are able to accomplish.
Well, we need you and many, many other partners to make it happen. Thank you.